We're looking at two of the hottest electric cars coming out of China right now, the Dongfeng Box and the BYD Dolphin, and they're both starting to pop up all over the world. But this is way more than just a spec comparison. It's a genuine clash of philosophies. You've got one car that's all about what you can see and feel, and another that's obsessed with the deep engineering you can't see. So which one is the better car? Let's dive in.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the companies that make these cars. Then, we'll get into their design and performance. But the real, and I mean real, story comes out when we get to safety. That's where things get dramatic. And at the end, we'll wrap it all up to help you figure out which philosophy and which car makes the most sense. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the companies themselves. You really can't understand these cars without knowing where they come from. And we are talking about two completely different beasts with totally different backstories. So in one corner, you've got Dongfeng. Think old school, state-owned industrial powerhouse. They've been building heavy-duty stuff for decades, and the Box is their big play for the modern consumer EV world. And in the other corner, BYD. They're a totally different story. They didn't start building cars. They started by making batteries. And that tech-first DNA, well, it's baked into everything they make. Believe me, this difference is going to matter a lot. So how does that company backstory actually show up in the metal? Let's start with the obvious stuff, the things you see right away. The design. How do they look? And how do they use their space? Okay, when you just look at the raw numbers, something pretty interesting pops out. The Dongfeng Box is actually shorter than the Dolphin, but it's a good bit wider. And look at the wheelbase. That's the space between the front and back wheels. It's almost as long as the Dolphin's, even though the car itself is smaller. Yeah, that's no accident. That is 100% on purpose. So what does that whole wheels to the corners thing actually mean for you? Well, it does two things. First, it makes the inside feel way bigger than it has any right to be. And second, it makes the car feel super nimble for zipping around town. BYD, on the other hand, plays it a bit safer with more traditional proportions. It's like two different answers to the same question. How do you build the perfect small car? And that philosophical split, you see it big time when you open the doors. Dongfeng is all about giving you these little tastes of luxury, like frameless doors and seats that recline all the way flat. Stuff you just don't expect in a car at this price. But BYD, they lean hard into their tech roots. You get that famous rotating screen and their whole futuristic ocean aesthetics thing going on. It's a completely different vibe. All right, looks are one thing, but let's talk about what really matters in an EV. What's under the floor? How do these things actually drive? Now, if you just glance at the spec sheet, you might think, hey, these are basically the same car. Both have 70 kilowatts of power, but you gotta look closer. The Dolphin gives you a little more torque, and that's a big deal for city driving. Plus, it's got BYD's own legendary blade battery. Dongfeng, they buy their battery from someone else, and that can make a real difference in how everything works together. So what is torque, really? It's that get-up-and-go feeling when the light turns green. It's that instant punch of acceleration. And yeah, that extra 20 Newton meters for the Dolphin might not sound like a huge number, but trust me, when you're driving around town, you feel it. The car just feels quicker, more alive off the line. All right, we've talked looks, we've talked performance, but now we get to the single most critical part of this whole comparison. This is the moment where these two cars stop being rivals and start being, well, in completely different leagues. We need to talk about safety. So, the Dongfeng Box went through testing with Euro NCAP, and if you don't know, that's pretty much the gold standard for car safety in Europe. They are tough, and the Box scored just 3 stars. Look, for a brand new car hitting the market right now, that is not just bad, it's genuinely worrying. And then there's the BYD Dolphin. It went through the exact same brutal tests, and it came out with a perfect 5-star rating. So the big question is, how? How can two cars that seem so similar on the surface have such a gigantic, massive gap when it comes to safety? You just have to look at the scores to see what's going on. Check out adult occupant protection, 69% versus 82%. That 13-point gap isn't just a number. That's a huge difference in how the car's actual frame holds up and protects you in an accident. We're not talking about beeping sensors here. We're talking about the core structure of the car. So what went so horribly wrong for the Dongfeng? Well, the official report is, it's pretty damning. We're talking catastrophic failures. The car's body was literally ripping apart at the welds in a crash. The airbag didn't have enough pressure. The doors locked themselves shut after the crash, and there were no systems to stop the driver and passenger from smashing into each other. I mean, these aren't small details.
These are failures of the most basic, fundamental safety principles.
The industry analyst didn't pull any punches. This quote just says it all. The problem wasn't the high-tech stuff. It was the absolute basics, the nuts and bolts of how you build a car. A failure of basic mechanical engineering. Ouch. Okay, so after seeing all that, where do we land? What's the final verdict? Well, the truth is, these cars aren't really aiming for the same driver. They're built on two totally different ideas of what's important in a car. Let's break it down like this. The Dongfeng box, that's the car for the aesthetic first driver. You're someone who cares about style, that airy cabin feel, and getting those cool premium features for driving around the city. On the flip side, the BYD Dolphin is for the engineering first driver. You're the person who cares more about what you can't see, that 5-star safety rating, the rock-solid battery tech, and the peace of mind that comes with a well-built platform.
So in the end, this whole thing is bigger than just two cars. It's really a question about what you value most. And that's the question I want to leave you with. When you go to buy a car, what's more important? The flashy features you can see and touch every single day, or the invisible engineering that's there to save your life when you need it most?